Let's learn pointers in C programming language. What exactly is a pointer? A pointer is just an address variable. It's meant for storing the address of the data and not the data itself. So for example, say I have a data type int and a variable called number. And this variable number is meant to store an integer. So for example, if I wanted to store 23 into number, then the number will hold the data 23. Let's assume that this is happening in main. This white strip right here is the memory. So I'm going to create a stack frame for main. So inside of main, we have this data type called number. And this number, and I'm going to abbreviate N for number so that I can fit it in here. And this number will have its own address in memory. So let's just say that this is 0x100. And this number memory address holds the value 23. And this is located in the stack frame. And memory is divided into three sections: the stack, the heap, and down here at the bottom is the code. And so in the stack frame, inside of main scope, we have a variable called number that stores an integer, which is basically a whole number. Another data type in the C programming language is called a pointer. Now, pointers in itself scare a lot of people that are learning how to program in C because it's a different type of data type. It doesn't hold the data. It holds the address of a particular data. But if you think about it, it's really not that hard. It's really simple. So let me create a pointer variable. Now, when you create a pointer variable, you have to include the asterisk. And let me call this pointer PTR. And right now I'm going to set it to equal null. And this is known as a null pointer at the moment. And I'm going to explain this later on in more detail. Now, what this does is it holds the address of a particular like type data type, and in this case number, because they're both integers. It stores the address of that number. And so in order to store the address of an integer variable, I have to use an operator called ampersand. And this allows us to store the address of a variable. So in this case, we're going to store the address of number. Let me make our main stack frame. Let me give it more room. And so what happens is PTR is created in memory, and PTR has its own address. So this is the pointer, but instead of holding a data, PTR cannot hold an integer value. It cannot hold 23. It can only hold an address. It's an address variable. So in this case, it's going to hold the address of number. And in this case, the address of number is 0x100. And so what it's basically doing is this pointer is pointing to the address of number, hence the name pointer. And if you look at our memory here in this white strip, whenever you declare a pointer, it will be created in the stack. And the system allocates memory locations to hold the value of each variable. And each variable, whether it's an int pointer variable or just a regular integer variable, will have its own unique addresses. And again, the address of a variable can be determined by using the ampersand operator. And I will explain this concept in more detail later. So why do we need pointers? Well, we need pointers for several reasons. Number one is to access files. Now, the computer holds data in several different ways. It has hard drives, SSD, etc. And then it has the RAM memory. Now, the RAM memory is volatile because that's where data is located. So data is put on the RAM, and that's where we can do things like modify it and do operations with it. And once we shut the computer off, all of that data disappears because the RAM is volatile. And so that's one reason why we need pointers, is to be able to access data files such as a hard drive or SSD or disk drive, etc. Second reason is to access extended or external things like a keyboard, a monitor, or the internet, etc. We also need pointers so that we can return more than one value from a function. And again, I'll go over this later on. And 4, to pass parameters. 5, we need pointers to pass arrays and strings more conveniently from one function to another. 6, pointers are used to manipulate arrays by moving the pointers to them instead of moving the arrays itself. And again, I will go over this in detail later on. 7, pointers are used to allocate memory and to access it. such as the heap or for dynamic memory allocation. Remember, when we use malloc or calloc, the only way we can access the heap memory is by using pointers. Finally, we need pointers so that we can create complex data structures such as linked lists. Now, what are some of the advantages of using pointers? Well, there are several. One, it allows us to access variables that are defined outside of the function. Two, pointers are more efficient in handling data tables. And three, pointers can reduce the length and complexity of a program. Pointers can also increase execution speed. 5, the use of pointer to an array of character strings results in saving of data storage and memory. Now remember, the C language does not have the string data type. Rather, we use characters and a combination of characters to create a string. 6, function pointers can be used to call other functions. And 7, pointers can give a convenient method for storing strings. Again, 7 kind of goes with number 5. 8, many built-in C functions work with strings use pointers. And finally, it provides a way of accessing variable without referring to the variable directly. So in this series, I'm going to explain the different types of pointers, and hopefully by the time the series is done, you'll have a better understanding of what pointers are, why we use them, and the advantages of using pointers.